Before we move on to the next topics, I want to introduce two concepts that will keep up coming up through this course and help to understand economics a little bit better. So we'll be talking about capacity factor and LCOE. Let's start with capacity factor. So what's that? And it's quite simply the ratio between what power plant actually produces over time and what it could have produced if it ran at full nameplate power all the time. So I will just highlight here nameplate. And for example, solar panel might be 20% efficient and converting sunlight. So our nameplate capacity will consider this 20% efficiency. But what will determine capacity factor is how often the sun is actually available, plus curtailment, outages, and some system constraint. So with capacity factor, we are looking not on efficiency of conversion solar energy, but for availability of this power plant. Again, for example, we know, that it's available during only day hours. Sometimes there could be heavy clouds, so production will be minimal. And in many locations, also sunny hours during winter period much shorter. All this considered in capacity factor, and you can see many in this graphic. You can see that many dots represents many power plants around the world. But generally, for solar, we can see they are grouped around 25%. For wind, it will be a little bit higher. For gas, over there, like a lot of dots and different gas power stations will have like different profiles. And I wanna talk about this because I often saw discussions where people not familiar with economical calculation are telling that solar generation is not effective and should be replaced, for example, by nuclear. And just because it doesn't work around the clock, so it will be very expensive to build solar stations. But in the real cases, developers who are making decisions on what generation to build perfectly understand these limitations and consider this like that they produce energy in just a small portion of time. Yeah, so that's about solar. For the next slide, let's look in LCOE and what actually is LCOE. LCOE stands for levelized cost of electricity, and generally it's cost of electricity generation over lifetime of plant, and it answers a very simple question: how much does it cost to produce 1 unit of electricity over the entire lifetime of a power plant? Or much simpler, what's the cost of 1 kilowatt hour, for example, of energy that I will later sell to the grid? And that's the reason why you will actually see it very often like metrics dollars per megawatt hour or dollars per kilowatt hour, because it makes much easier to compare, because people buy in the same metric, like you pay for kilowatt hour or watt hour or whatever. So the simplest form of LCOE is just total lifetime cost divided by total lifetime energy produced. It's quite simple, yeah? We'll look in more details. In LCOE include both capex, so like infrastructural, like equipment, and also OPEX costs. So it's operational costs like maintenance, insurance, land, people, salaries, cost of fuel. So it considers all costs that our energy producing facility will face throughout the lifetime of the system. And maybe why do we need this? You can think about this. How do you plan to compare a nuclear plant that could run for 50 years, 90% capacity factor, and produces steadily power almost all the time, and a solar farm that's worked for 20 years, capacity factor much smaller, and at the same time it even will lose capacity and generation over the lifetime due to degradation. So it's like if you just compare upfront cost, nuclear will look like crazy expensive. If you compare nameplate capacity without a capacity factor, solar will look super cheap. So none of this is correct, and That's where LCOE solved this problem by asking, over the lifetime of each system, after accounting for all costs, capacity factor, fuel, utilization, how much for me will actually each megawatt or kilowatt hour of electricity will cost to produce. That's why LCOE is so widely used. And just let's look into one example, specifically prepared because it's the most popular one from the market. Let's look into solar farm and nuclear farm. And at first glance, nuclear looks crazy expensive. Again, it could cost around $1 billion just to build it, and it will take like 15 years. And versus like 115 million in 2 years for solar with the same nameplate capacity. Operational expenses also higher. So like for nuclear farm, yeah, you need to buy like nuclear fuel, and it's not so easy to do. But at the same time, a nuclear plant will run almost all the time for decades, usually 50 plus years. And solar, on the other hand, is more like a sprinter. It's cheap to install, but it's only run when the sun is out, and it slowly loses performance over the time. So even though solar looks cheaper up front, over its lifetime it actually produces much less total energy. From this calculation, you can see like yield of these two, so it's crazy different. But what will you see? That if we do all the calculation, that LCOE, we can compare them. We can see these LCOE numbers and actually see the difference in cost of ownership, cost of energy generation of solar, for example, and nuclear. And that's actually we use LCOE. Not to pick up the winners, but we can compare absolutely different technologies on the fair terms. And just a quick note here, before we move on, that's in the real world, these calculations are much more detailed. These numbers are just to give you some concept how it all works and how it allows us to compare like solar farms, for example, a nuclear farm. And this concept is very important further when we look into like drivers of the change in the energy industry. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed and understand this, and we'll see you in the next video.